だから機械研ぎなら3日で終わるようなのも、やっぱそこからさらに2週間ぐらいかかっちゃうんですよね。
We're jumping in on Mazaki knives today. They're incredible knives. You know, they look simple, but his craftsmanship goes very deep, deeper than you'd expect from what you look at here. Naoto and I have both visited, and we are here to tell you all about them.
If there is a scale of handmade, 1 to 10, 10 as the most handmade, most hands-on, one's being more belt conveyors, you know, machine does everything. His knives, most knives are almost like 10 level.
Like he almost uses his fist instead of a hammer.
Yes. No. And he's very talented. He can do anything from, say, making a samai, basically making a forge welding 3 different steels into, you know, like these. He also can do a honyaki, which he starts from 1 piece of steel, forging into the shape. It's really, really difficult to do. And yeah, he's getting better all the time. So, I mean, obviously he doesn't make handles.
Right,
But
he's a knife maker, not a handle maker.
exactly. As far as blades making are concerned, he is at the top level of a handmadeness. And we'll explain what that actually means.
All right, so that's current Mazaki, but let's rewind back to the beginning of the Mazaki. Well, maybe not the very beginning, we don't know that much.
Right.
But what we do know about him from having met him a couple times is that straight up, the guy rode around Japan on a motorbike to find himself and figure out what he wanted to do. He knew he wanted to do stuff by hand. He loves working with his hands and building stuff. And he started doing what? Leather work first?
So he is based out of Sanjo right now. He apprenticed under the Tsuneo Yoshida-san, who was the head blacksmith of Yoshikane at the time. So before he started working or apprenticing under the Yoshida-san, he was, yes, riding around the bike. He's originally from northern island of Hokkaido. He was traveling by himself, trying to find the things to do or what he wants to do in his life. And blacksmith was one of the choices, so he actually traveled a few different places like Tosa, Sakai, and other knife making places as well. But he ended up in Sanjo. That was the style that he wanted to do. It was the handmadeness, the philosophy of knife making that struck him. Well, he was struck by the lightning, not really, but the idea of the knife making in Sanjo, so he decided to stay.
Well, and you can see it in his knives. They're very emblematic of that Sanjo Niigata style of knife making, which to me, you're gonna get a knife that's a little bit wider at the spine, but has a really nice taper down to a very, very fine edge. It's gonna feel very good in your hand, but it's not light like a feather, right? And the fact that he worked at the Yoshikane family's forge to learn from, like we have seen several really good blacksmiths who did their apprenticeship there and have gone on to sort of, pollinate that region as blacksmiths themselves, and their knives are always so well put together. These look pretty simple, they're cool. They got the Kurochi finish, there's a simple octagonal handle, Gyuto Nakiri, standard shapes. Nothing wild about them, but there's something under the surface that you can't really see. Tell us about it.
So he does pretty much everything that's been told or taught by Yoshida-san, except one step, which is the bevel sharpening. So he follows the steps of Yoshida-san for the forging and every step that he forged the knives into. Then, if you see closely on the bevel, you can see the little fainted lines or the very small scratches goes diagonally. If you look at a knife making process, for sharpening process that matter, they forge the blade and you see those big wheels, probably meter and a half wheel. They put on those wheels to make a bevel, and they do use several different wheels to kind of make the, scratches smaller. Then they probably take it to the bell sander, they maybe take it to the buffing wheel, And at the very end, they do acid etch or some like sandblast to kind of do that stuff.
Sandblast kind of evens the look out.
Exactly.
So if there's any low points or any deep scratches, it kind of like
musket, yeah,
kind of
right?
like makeup, right?
Yeah, so
it covers it
just
up.
covers it up.
Sure.
If you look at those knives, all the scratch lines, because the wheel spins this way, all the scratch lines goes perpendicular to the edge. Mazaki-san, first heavy lifting, he uses the big wheel. So he forges into the shape and he tries to grind the bevel out. First initial grind, he has to grind a lot of steel, right? So he uses very coarse wheel, grind them on those big wheels. But after that, he takes the blade and he sneaks into this like small cave underneath of the stairs where we actually did interviews.
Yeah.
Then he starts sharpening. So from that point on, he doesn't use any machinery.
これうちの仕上げというか、この切れ刃部分の仕上げですね。手研ぎでやってます。
それはどうして？
結局包丁って研いで使っていくんで、このエンドユーザーの人たちが自分で研ごうと思った時に、見て分かる通り機械研ぎで仕上げると当たらない部分がいっぱい出てくるんですよ。でこれでもし無理やり当てていくと刃の形が崩れたりして長く使えなくなるんで、うちはそこを極力なくすように手間はかかるんですけども、全部手研ぎで綺麗に当たるように仕上げてます。
Which is incredible. It's like
It is
nobody does
amazing.
that. No
Yeah.
one does that.
Yeah. When you think about it from a business perspective, it is a sensible thing for a craftsman to do all the work that goes into forging a blade, to then run through a series of power tools to get that blade shaped and to get those scratch marks evened out, and then to just buff it up so it looks nice and then sandblast it, and then do a final polish and sharpening on it. That would probably take them way less time and they'd be able to put out much better knives.
Exactly. So what he was saying is that from the time he takes the knife from that big coarse wheel, sneaks into the cave, takes anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, hour and a half for each knife.
For each knife.
Each knife.
That's crazy.
が
大体30分から45分。当たりが悪い時は1時間ぐらい。
It has a reason though, right? Like you wonder why he does that.
Why does he go to this extent of work?
Exactly, right? Because when it comes to the sharpness or how it cuts, it may not affect as much.
I know why he does it. He does it for you.
Yes.
You, the person who has this knife. That's who he does it for. Why? Because it's so much easier to resharpen it. He really thinks about the customer. He thinks about the person who's going to own and use this knife over time. And he even thinks about us who are the sharpeners. Say you're going to learn to sharpen your own knife, he's thinking about you. If it's us sharpening a knife, he's thinking about us.
So he knows the knives, you will need to sharpen them over time, right? I mean,
Sure, yeah.
And any knives. And often we call it the hot rodding process or the thinning process. As you use your knife and sharpen them, as you sharpen them, the knife becomes quite thick so that you will have to grind off this whole bevel part, right? And if you do any of the thinning processes, you would know most knives would have tiny bit of low spots, which is not really the bad thing, necessarily. If it's like too much, it can affect a little bit, but it's not really a bad thing. But that's when his knives shines, because he finishes everything, and initial grinding process he does is to make sure there's no low spots. So when you grab this knife, use it for 3-4 months or something, then say if you use them for a year, then you will need to sharpen them. Grab this knife, put that on a stone on the bevel flat, you will notice there's no low spots.
Yeah, and I've seen that a lot of times. Obviously, sharpened a lot of knives, you put a knife on the stone, you start working it on the stone to thin it out because you want it to stay nice and thin, right? And you see a patch show up where you can tell that the stone's not touching the blade. And you kind of work past it. It's not a big deal really, and you kind of just have to get in there and smooth it out. But when you hit one of these knives on the stone, a Mazaki knife doesn't do that. He takes painstaking amount of efforts to go into creating this knife at such a fine level of detail that no one does it because it's not a smart idea. I mean, for us, it's lovely to have these knives, but for him, it just makes his job so difficult. But he is so committed to what he does that it is the way he is. It's how he does it. It's part of what you get with one of his knives.
Yeah, he's done it for us basically.
まあ道具として長く使ってもらうためですね。あとはもう手研ぎで研いてくれれば戸当たりが良くて長く使っていただけるかなと思います。
How he choose the knife to work with, what kind of steel that he's working with, the criteria, like first criteria is whether the steel is forge weldable, weldable.
Yeah,
You know,
forge weldable.
Yes, if the steel he can forge weld in-house, that's the first thing that he will look at, and that's how he choose the knife steels to work with.
Yeah, right.
Whether Aogami Super, he's perfected. It's actually really hard. Not many knife makers like Moritaka-san does it in-house. They took very long time to perfect, but there are only very few knife makers uses and perfect the forge welding of the Aogami Super. But not only that, he does the knife like this. It's the Honyaki. Aogami, Gami #1, or blue carbon steel #1 Hamon. Where he puts a little bit thicker clay so that this part is really soft but the edge is really hard. I love how he finishes this. Like most people who does honyakis, they like to finish the bevel really nice and shiny, buffing wheel, polish it up. Even this, you can see he's done all by hand.
Yeah, of course. I would leave that too. That's his signature to me. That's his trademark. When you look at it, you can see the diagonal lines across the bevel. You know that he has done this all by hand. You can see the way the light reflects off of it. This beautiful sort of like clamshell sort of edge to it. It's such a lovely piece. I think it would be a shame if he was to erase the signals that he has done all of that work, right? And it's crazy because it's so even. The little abrasion marks from the stones are so even across the blade. It's amazing. This is the Mazaki Kurochi Nishiji. I've got the Santoku in this line. I use it all the time. I really, really like it. He's got a number of different shapes, and it's a series that we've had for a long time. We really like having it around. It comes, it goes, it comes, it goes. I mean, it takes him a long time to do what he does, so he can't make everything we ask for, but that's part of what makes them so special.
We focus more on these three shapes. We have Nakiri, we have 210 Gyuto, and we have 240 Gyuto. It's incredibly well made with such great forging techniques as well. He does the sharpening process for every knife he makes, right? Not only for those knives that, not especially made, but occasionally makes like Aogami Super or the Honyaki knives. He takes that same exact process of sharpening for every single knife he makes.
And it's a crazy amount of value that you get. So one of the reasons we're excited about this is that way he sharpens the knives, it makes it easy to do, and you remove less steel every time, which means your knife is gonna last a little bit longer. It's just, I don't know, I really appreciate the way he makes his knives. I don't know, this one's really calling to me because it just has so many fine details. I like the way it tapers here at the collar, so you've got that really comfortable grip. I like when you look at it, you can see how even the core is between the cladding. It's just exactly straight, and it just feels good, right? The balance of it, everything about it just feels right to me.
You know why it's straight? Well, not why, but because he finishes by hand.
It has to be straight.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
if there's a little bit of distortion of bend, he can immediately tell,
Yeah.
right? His knives are crazy. Like, look at how thick this part
Yeah.
of the spine is.
Yeah.
Now the spine thickness is so irrelevant information. Like it's probably like 6 millimeters.
Yeah. It's huge. But it's like, I find it's really comfortable. And it really pulls the weight of the knife right into that spot where you're holding it.
Yeah.
Which to me makes the knife feel light despite the fact that it is heavier. And when you're using that knife with a little bit of extra mass, I find if you're just focusing on sliding the knife and making your cut motion, the weight of the knife does the rest of the work for you. I think that's one of the things that's nice about his knives is it drives. All right, test drive time. I got a 240 Mazaki. At the back, it starts to curl a little bit, but it is quite thick. So, I mean, when you're busting through stuff, that thickness is really nice. Like, it's like nothing. It's like there's nothing there. It just is sturdy feeling. Like the back of the knife is like the workhorse, and this is like the finesse at the front. It's just such a cool knife. See how thin I can get my julienne here. It's got a nice roll at the tip, so it really smoothly glides across the board as I'm giving it that bit of a rock. Bit of a thump on the heel, you can hear that. Kind of straight, the knife runs kind of straight here at the heel. Give you a bit of a thump, but it's nice and solid when you get to the back. And then, oh yeah, that's doing okay, hey? I think that's a brunoise, hey? Would you call it a brunoise? It's nice and fine.
Well, obviously, this is what we call a small maker collection. As we explained all of those like process that he takes, he can't make enough for us to, carry them in full time.
He's really a boutique knife maker. We only get a limited supply, so we like to spend this time focusing on some of these smaller craftspeople we work with, and he is a shining star of that list, I think, right now. You can go to our website, knifewear.com. You can see them there. We'll have some in stock in the near future here. And you can also go and check them out at any of our stores. We do have locations now: Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, Ottawa, and Toronto. And you can come visit us. We have them. You can hold them. You can see them. You can look at them. And you can talk to us more about them. You can see what they like, what they feel like in your hands. If you're lucky enough to be close to one of our stores, please drop by and say hello. We'd love to entertain you with our fantastic knives.
So if you want to see more Knives Like a Small Maker collection, check our website, knifewear.com. And if you want to know more, like a Mazaki-san, check out this video.
Donabe cats. Donabe neko. Neko donabe? How do you say that?
Donabe neko.
Donabe neko.